the end of World War II, the outboard industry changed a lot. There was people coming home from the war and they wanted stuff. They wanted to buy stuff. The first engines that came out from OMC were left over, repainted with different colors, but some of the other companies that were in business who could shifted from war to civilian production, they wanted to sell outboards, and they made some pretty weird features. You got to remember, I'm still a mechanic, so I think like one, and some of this stuff to me was pretty stupid. But number one, we have the Martin here that had supposedly a manual power trim, so you could adjust your angle underway. Well, I don't know if anybody here has ever tried to adjust one of these things while you're actually going, but you've got to have the grip of a gorilla, and you've got to have biceps as large as Arnold Schwarzenegger. So that didn't all work all that good. Another feature they had that wasn't bad, but I don't think many people used it, is when you tilted the engine up after you'd hit some rocks and busted your shear pin, you could, with the use of this little lever here, if I can get it, yep, there we go, I just lifted it up and swung it over. Now I can take and hold my hand up and swing the whole engine inboard and change my shear pin. While all the gas is pouring out of the top and your carburetor is leaking because you forgot to shut off your gas and that kind of thing.
So while you're doing all that, though, I mean, okay, so now this is in the boat, dripping gas and all that.
Right, and you've got water running from your impeller back into your power head, so you might hydrolock the engine, yes.
Now, when you're over here sitting in your boat and you manage to get the propeller off, can you reach where the shear pins are hidden?
I don't know where the shear pins are hidden, but they are hidden on this engine.
Yeah, by the gas cap.
By the gas cap?
Yeah.
Whereabouts did you have
under,
the gas?
Under the lid there.
Well, let's take a look at that.
Yeah.
That's very good, Bill. I was not aware that they were hidden under the gas cap. We will definitely take a look and see where they are.
Right.
So now I relocked that, so now you can't swivel it anymore.
Right. So now you get your shear
gas
pin.
cap.
Right.
Oh, right. Well, look at that.
So you didn't even know.
I didn't even know they existed.
A steel one.
How about that? Not bad. Another point is this has a stopper, which if you leave it closed for a couple of years, it leaks like a sieve. That's why I leave it floppy like this, because they don't last long.
So anyway,
okay, so that's the Martin.
Right. If you broke a shear pin, though,
you could change it.
The first thing you want to do, though, is while the motor is in its operating position, to grab a shear pin
and then close your gas cap again.
Right.
Because if you reach back with it tilted up, all the gas would pour out into the water, and you'd have an environmental disaster. Right. Okay, all right.
But it sounded good in the sales room. I mean, it sounded really very appealing in the, yeah.
Oh, the sales room.
Yeah. Huh?
Yes. Right. Okay, the second one to take a look at is the Scott Atwater Bail-O-Matic. Somewhere in this thing. All right, here
it says it.
Over this side. This is a Bail-O-Matic.
Right, it says so.
Over here, if you look, you can see that is the hose that connected to the Bail-O-Matic. It had a hose with a little screened pickup, so you could put it in the bottom of the boat. This was the first series that they came out with, and they put both water pump and the Bail-O-Matic pump down in the bottom. The next model, for some very strange reason, they moved all the pumps up top here. I have no idea why, because they burned out almost instantly, both pumps. So you were always changing your water pump, and if you didn't have it lubricated, it was, and the Bail-O-Matic rarely worked because nobody could do both of them at once, and they were very hard to get to. You had to take your power head off, drop your lower unit. It was a big chore. So this one right here made a little bit more sense. It was at least down in the water. When you started out, the water pumps were immersed in water, so they would actually work.
So what happens with that open hole, and if you don't have a hose attached to that? Does it suck in air, or what happens?
It sucks in air, but it's lubricated, and that's the only concern. Mechanically, as a mechanic, the only concern we have is that the water pump, that the Bail-O-Matic pump itself stays
underwater.
underwater and gets
Yeah.
water lubrication.
Yeah.
Because if it's out of the water, it just burns up. It gets hot and burns up. So
You kind of wonder who would think about making that water pump much harder to get at. What would be the incentive for having a design with a water pump where this one is,
Well, let's
like an OMC motor?
wait a minute. Wait. We're gonna have two answers here. Okay. You worked with engineers all of your life.
Right.
What would an engineer say? What was the reason for moving it up?
It's because it's an engineering project I feel like doing.
Okay. Well, as a mechanic, I'd say somebody just got plain stupid.
Right. No, it's true. I can't see. I mean, maybe there was some financial advantage from the manufacturing point of view.
God, I just can't imagine going from I just can't imagine it. I can't imagine anybody having no brains.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah, I know.
like I say, that's the way I look at this
Yeah.
stuff.
So what year is this, Scott?
It's in the 50s,
Okay.
57 maybe, 56. Let me look. I can
Okay.
read the front. This one, 1955.
Okay. And then you think by
57, I think they were starting to,
Go
when it
into-
no longer was Scott Atwater, when it was bought out by McCulloch.
Oh. Yeah.
That's when you started to see the impellers being up top. It might have
Okay.
been towards the end of the
Okay.
Scott Atwater regime, but I think it was McCulloch
Okay.
that's really guilty of putting them up in the leg.
All right.
But that's a guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but this one doesn't have any other features. Well, it has a gear shift, but it doesn't have any features that allow it to swing into the boat like the Martin or any of that.
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Other than that, it was pretty standard.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, now we have another Scott Atwater that's a little bit earlier than this one I want to talk about, which, right here, this Scott. This had some unusual features, most of which was it had an automatic gas shutoff. When you moved your lever all the way over to the side, it had some O-rings and some little holes that would shut off the gasoline to the carburetor, and then you could drain the carburetor by pushing in on your high-speed adjustment knob, and it would
Onto your
release a
onto your
little-
shoe?
Huh?
Did it dribble onto your shoe?
It dribbled all over everything, and half the time it leaks from the tank too. After it gets a little bit worn out, it's not a working rig.
Oh, uh-huh.
All right, so
So that was another feature
Feature
that
that
somebody
it
had
was-
this great idea,
Yes.
but never really
didn't work
perfected.
well at all.
I mean,
No,
for some
didn't.
reason, it
It
was
was
just
way too gimmicky, and
All right.
that's one of the problems with those. Okay, while we're here, built in the same building as this one, Scott Atwater, but in the other half of the building was Champion.
I
The
didn't know that.
factory had a wall in the middle of the building, and Champions were made in one end, and Scott Atwaters were made in the other.
Huh.
It's my understanding.
So the people go back and forth. That or do they
Apparently they
try
ate
to
lunch
keep it
together, and
Yeah.
and of course at one point, Scott, prior to World War II, Champion was made by Scott Atwater,
Right.
by the machine group. So
So if they were kind of near the same building, one could say, just same monkeys, different tree.
pretty much, you look at the engines, they look a lot alike, different color, but they're the same sort of styling.
Right. Right.
Now this right here is an example of, oh God, just to me unbelievable. Okay, this engine right here internally has crankcase porting and reed cage. And the reason it has crankcase porting is because Dumonte got paid so much per engine that was cranked out the door, except that he owned the company, and I really don't understand why they managed to spend all that money for a crankcase porting when they already had a reed cage on it.
Well, the same thing happened with Martin, right? I mean, there was that patented
valves.
patented poppet valves.
Yes.
Turned out to be worth nothing.
Well, I think it worked well in the little engines like that.
Well, they
one we
work
just
well,
looked
but
at.
so don't reeds. I mean,
But not on the 20 cubic inch Martin. It was a disaster. That thing over there, that Martin 200.
But the fact that that Martin stopped, it became very clear near the end of Martin
that was no good. Yes.
that the poppet valves
Right.
were not a competitive in the
Absolutely.
world of 50s outboards,
They
with
weren't.
reeds, being much less money to make, and those engines perform just as well.
I got a really good story about exactly that.
All right.
So here I am at 16 years old working for a Mercury mechanic, or Mercury dealership in Waldoboro, Maine. And I'm at the shop, it's late in the afternoon, we've already closed up, but the boss is still there and I'm still there. And these two guys come up to the door and say, can we use your outdoor test tank? We want to start our engine, make sure it goes before we go fishing. And my boss, Irvin, I said, Irvin, is it okay if these guys... Yeah, fine. What do they got? One of them Martins? He said, yeah, you make sure they stay outside. And so these guys stick it in the tank and they fire it up, and the Martin, they have the bottom cover off of it, and the Martin poppet valve stick, and it spits back and catches the guy's shirt on fire.
And you actually saw that.
I did.
That was amazing.
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And Irvin was not surprised at all. That's why he said keep them outside.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's one thing on this thing that's amazing, on this Champion. But we've also got this hydro drive. Okay, from here to here, we have a normal conventional clutch which goes in and out and engages the drive shaft with the propeller shaft. So we have forward, neutral. Here, we have a hydraulic motor run with gear oil in the lower unit. The prop is no longer connected directly to the drive shaft. The drive shaft creates oil, runs basically a hydraulic motor which drives the propeller, and you engage it or disengage it with this lever right here. It gets more or less pressure from the hydraulic pump to turn the propeller. So the whole idea was that you could have the engine at half throttle because it didn't idle down very well, and you could engage the propeller so it's just barely turning over. And we have a video of that, actually, this engine here running and the propeller turning over very, 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 very slowly.
So fishermen could like that for trolling?
That was the whole idea.
All right. Huh. Yeah. Is that probably good in salt water?
All I can tell you, this is absolutely disaster in salt water. So all I can tell you about this engine right here is I purchased it from Palmer Sargent, and it didn't work. It would, engage, run with it fully engaged with the clutch dog, but I couldn't get the hydraulic part of it to run. I fought with it for a year and a half, and I put the engine up in the attic, and I didn't touch it for another 15 years. And I finally got upstairs and started looking at it again, and a guy came into my shop who was a hydraulic guy, and I had the lower unit apart. And he picks up the propeller shaft and its connected stuff and says, my God, he said, that's a hydraulic pump. I said, what? That's the lower unit for an outboard. He said, no, it's a hydraulic pump. I said, oh, so that's how it works. And after that point, I was able to figure out how it went together, and with some help from Tom Mulder out in Minnesota, he got me parts and was able to get me running. Okay, so that's the Champion. While we're on Champions, why don't I talk about the other Champion here? This was another stupid feature engine, if there ever was one. And this one put them out of business. This is the Champion pacemaker. It's got instead of a hydraulic drive, this one has a spring drive like the Mercury, except all the springs are in the lower units. And I have a few of the parts and pieces right here. This one had forward, neutral, reverse, and it has one of the springs is missing, but this is one of the drives right here. This spring is engaged and disengaged to allow it to slip on the shaft or to turn on the shaft. Right now it has a little bit of grease, so it's not working, and it was shacked anyhow. And then this outer part, there's another spring on the outside, which was broken. And that engages and disengages the various gears, from neutral to forward to reverse.
So do you think that some of these features we talked about, like the hydro drive and now the spring drive, seems to me, in looking at other outboards and looking at some of the more simple, like the OMCs of the 50s with just that dog drive, just the yoke that slide back. It seems to me that some of these features, although they may have been sales or marketing features to describe potential customers, but I would think that they probably cost more to make.
No question about it.
And that, to me, would be in the very competitive market in the 50s. You would just easily engineer yourself out of business.
I think that's what happened with this pacemaker. I truly do. I think that was one of the reasons it went under. I think that was one of the reasons. The other thing is that back in the 50s, when I started in this industry, even in the 60s, labor was a very small portion of the cost component of the outboard. It was probably the smallest of all of us. I said I was making 55 cents an hour, which wasn't a bad wage as a mechanic. And the parts were expensive. And no question about it. This thing had far more parts and pieces, but they were looking for, I don't know what they were looking for, because Mercury did it too.
So that's right. So that
was on the drive shaft instead of on the prop shaft, but it worked the same way. Disengaged and engaged springs. You can see on this one, you can push on this spring hard enough, you can disengage it from the shaft, so that was your neutral. And then you had forward, the spring was engaged here, and then when it was in reverse, it disengaged this one as well, and the gears here would spin around the opposite way and make it go in reverse. The lower
so
unit.
It's like a little planetary transmission.
Exactly, planetary gear. But
it would no more like a differential. I mean.
Exactly. Yes.
Fascinating. So that saved them money, though, because they were able to not worry about.
They didn't have to machine the stuff in the lower unit.
In the gear case, so it was just a simple gear.
And
so Mercury may have made this decision.
They wanted an angle drive. That was the whole deal with this. They wanted the system to work at an angle. So your prop shaft came out like this. Instead of being upright, which you needed for that other system, you had to, they couldn't, this was the cheapest way they could figure out to make an angle drive so it was weedless.
Okay.
So I'm told. Whether that's just marketing, I have no idea. So.
All right.
And that would have been the Mark 10, which we'll look at. Should we go out and take a look at the Mark 10 right while we're here?
Yes.
Okay. This would be the Mark 10 that had that spring drive in it right here.
Okay.
Automatic transmission is what they called it.
Right.
And it also enabled them to put everything in one handle.
Okay.
Which was very unusual for that time period.
Right.
So you had.
So just show how that works.
Okay, you're in neutral.
Right.
Now you're in reverse.
Okay.
Now you're in forward full throttle.
I get it.
And reverse full throttle.
Oh, you can go full throttle and reverse on these?
Everything, well, not full, but you had a limit in it.
Okay.
A limiter, you can only go so fast, but that was how you got more throttle in reverse. This is what they worked out. If you look at this 6 horsepower right here, they figured out how to do the angle drive using a straight gear shift like the Johnson Evinrude used.
Right.
But that came along afterwards.
Right. It just has to do with the angle, the way the gears are.
Correct. They had to figure out the gearing and how to cut them and that kind of stuff. This right here is another example of a feature. This rig right here, this is a Super Silent 6, and it had a can opener, a beer bottle opener right there.
Okay.
Pop the top off. That was before alcohol and boating were not supposed to mix.
Oh, okay.
This one has a spring drive neutral. It does not have reverse, but it has a spring drive neutral, and you could rotate it all the way around in order to get reverse.
Ah, okay. What year with that?
1955, I think they came out with this. This is a 56. I think, something like that.